Welcome, everyone. I know there are still some folks trickling in, which is great, but it is a couple minutes past 7, so we want to go ahead and get started. As many of you know, and I see some familiar faces who have been here before, but I'm Annie Levinsky. I'm the Executive Director of Historic Denver. I want to thank some of our partners who have helped put on this series so far. We've had a great grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and new this time, we've had partnership support from the APA Colorado chapter as well. For those of you who are maybe attending for the first time tonight or not familiar with Historic Denver, we're a membership-based nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1970, and we really started this series, the RE Denver series, last summer because we believe that our work is about more than individual buildings. It's about the sum of our parts as a city and the identity of this place that we all love. And identity is really what has led us to our topic tonight. Because homogenization or blandness, as some people have put it, in our architecture erodes that identity and that sense of place. Our topic, is there a there, refers to the sense of being someplace or the sense of being no place. Our guest speaker tonight can really help us understand how we are either failing to honor identity or find authenticity in our buildings or where we might be able to succeed. He'll demonstrate how we are not alone in Denver and how Denver and Charlotte have something in common more than football, as Charlotte is dealing with many of these same issues around quality and identity. To give you a little more background on Tom before he comes up, Tom received his Bachelor of Architecture from Virginia Polytechnic Institute and his Master in Architecture with a specialization in suburban and town planning from the University of Miami. He did a lot of his graduate work on traditional neighborhood development ordinance and has worked for a long time with Duany, Plater, Zyberk, and Company. He began an office for that firm in Charlotte in 1995. And he's been very active in Charlotte, lecturing on issues around urban design and the quality of place. And specifically, 10 years ago, he founded the Civic by Design program. Civic by Design is really Charlotte's version of RE Denver, but with a much longer track record now. They've had great success in creating a constituency that really cares about urban design, quality, and the city's identity. And he started it, I think, for very much the same reasons that we started RE Denver. He realized that there needed to be a place in Charlotte where people could get together and have conversations about the decisions that were shaping the future and the next phase of our history. Because at Historic Denver, we realize that the buildings that we build today will be with us for a very long time. And we hope that 50 years from now, they'll be of such quality and compatibility in our city that we'll want to be saving them as here tonight. So again, thank you so much for being here, for supporting Historic Denver with your time. Of course, hope you will also consider supporting us as a member. And we do have membership materials down at the table in the lobby. But now I will welcome Tom to the stage so that we can begin.
Hello, everyone. Annie, thank you. Thank you, Historic Denver, for inviting me. And thank the staff for Nicole here for helping me get oriented somewhat here in Denver. And also Christine Frank, architect with University of Colorado. And then also this morning, I had this wonderful tour with Tom Matthews, which is out there somewhere. Raise his hand. Thank you for doing that. Wonderful architect here that has a passion for classical, beautiful buildings. So had a great experience so far. And it's fun to have kind of this exchange program. I hope this is I come out here. We lose the Super Bowl, so I come out here. And then next year we win the Super Bowl, so then you come to Charlotte, right? Okay. Just want to make sure that's clear with everybody. Okay. But no, seriously, I'm delighted to be out here. And there are some similarities, differences, and it's always good to bring somebody, from outside to come help stir the pot and think about things. And that's my role here. I don't think I'm going to have anything brilliant to say tonight. I'm not going to have any silver bullets. But I'll, basically help, provide some food for thought. And it's all, it's about keep going forward and keep moving along. And what will be fun is we're going to shift gears a little bit about maybe talking about, it's context in urban design and architecture. We're going to talk a little bit more about urban design and how to create great neighborhoods, mixopoly. It's a lot of fun. Stick around. There's no pressure. You don't have to become a designer. It's actually designed for non-designers, but you get to be creative. You get to be creative as a designer without any talent at all. You can do it, So we'd love for you to participate, and it's for every age and attitude. Also, it's interesting. I don't know if any of y'all have seen this. It's called the American Nations Today, and it's kind of a cultural map of the United States. Has anyone seen this before out there? It's kind of interesting because it talks about kind of the cultures and how we kind of culturally behave in certain parts of the country. And I don't know if you can read these, but I'm from Greater Appalachia. But Greater Appalachia, in terms of where people came and where they migrated to, really spans a huge part of the country. There's small, the Deep South. Actually, I'm located here in Charlotte, which is kind of straddling the Deep South. And there's some interesting, little places like Tidewater, Virginia, which I know a lot about. I grew up in Virginia. And then out here in the far west, where you're located. And then the left coast, which is interesting. And El Norte here, and the First Nation here, and Yankeedom up in this area. So it's meant to be kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of analysis of how we do things. And so when people say, why is he coming from Charlotte? What does he have to offer? Yes, I'm from Charlotte. It's different, But maybe there's some things that are the same. And in fact, there's a lot that's the same, because even though we have this kind of maybe cultural heritage, we also, a lot of things are similar. Like, the lenders don't look at this. They're basically lending money and dictating apartments in a certain size, form, shape, and quantity. And that's really controlling a lot about what we're getting in our built environment. And it's the same thing in Charlotte, it's the same thing out here, or north, south, east, west. You just see it all over. So a lot of factors that are out of control. But I do think that there is this kind of cultural center in each place that you come to, that basically they're very passionate people, and people that really are well, basically network together, and they help make decisions informally, but basically that affects things a lot more than maybe even formal decisions. So there are things like design, zoning rules, and then there's just, we all decided to kind of build stuff this way, and even though we compete against each other, we're all going to kind of do the same thing, and, we'll see what happens. And I think that's what's going on right now. That's why everything is starting to kind of turn out the way it is. A little bit about Charlotte. We have a kind of a hip district down next to Center City. We call it Uptown or Center City, called South End. This is the old industrial area. And that was our first light rail line. You can see here. Here's our light rail. And it's kind of started off really funky. This is the kind of shops and spaces, great spaces like Rhino. I went there and had lunch in Rhino today. And then the pressure's on. The heat's turned up. But we really love all these little touch points, street life. And this is a famous restaurant called the Chicken Coop, and market courtyards, and no barriers, and really walkable areas, and eclectic buildings, and streetcar museum, all sorts of stuff. And this is kind of what it looks like. It looks a lot like parts of Denver. And there's also a lot of vacant space, like surface parking lots. And even this is a food truck lot. That's the informal square. And there's a lot of pressure for things to happen. And so what is happening are these. This is what's coming in. These big, we call them land scrapers. I don't know if you've heard that term before. Land scrapers. This is a typical land scraper. Here's a smaller land scraper. And they're really strange. I mean, it has nothing to do with what's there. And there's a lot of effort to create interesting designs, with these teeth, like the E building here, the E building here, the old bank building. But it's just not the same, is it? So after being here a day and a half, believe me, I am not near an expert on anything, so don't expect me to tell you, like, here's what you really need to do. I really don't know. It's hard to really see what's going on, so I'm not the expert that, really, I can see exactly what you need to do. I'm not going to say that, but, there are some observations. This was a big article in the paper this morning I read, so basically you need starter housing. at least in the form they're talking about. I don't know if they're talking about single family, but there's a huge pent-up demand. Um, with every economy, it goes up and down. You know, Charlotte, the banks imploded in 2008, which basically was the lifeblood of Charlotte and just sucked the life out of the city for about 4 or 5 years. Huge unemployment, 12, 13%, and huge homeless population. This is your Salvation Army facility. Someone told me that this is a really good time to buy office furniture. And I looked out my hotel window this morning, and they were loading some chairs and stuff. So that's true. I understand you've got an energy, you know, that you're kind of tied to energy, so things are shrinking in some ways. And so we've been trying to address those kinds of things. I mean, you really can, like, how do you get your arms around something like that if you're just, you know, a small, you know, maybe unpowerful coalition, but people that really care about things. And so we did some silly stuff. I don't know if you've heard of tactical urbanism or guerrilla urbanism or lighter, what's it called, lighter, cheaper, quicker urbanism, where basically you insert, this is called a pop-up porch, which I came up with the idea of inserting these pop-up porches and parallel parking spaces on streets. And then we teamed up with the urban ministries and some other homeless programs and invited some of the homeless to come out and have conversations, because they're kind of just sitting there on the ground, you know, not doing much. And so, you know, creating a little bit more of awareness is something that you can do, and being, you know, kind of fun and innovative about it, and maybe something you can think about. So there are all sorts of ways to affect a city. So I'll sprinkle through this presentation some of the ideas that we, you know, just things that may or not work, but things that we're trying. Also, the conversation started about 1.5 years ago when I decided that people kept coming up to me and saying, "What are you going to do about all these ugly buildings?" And I said, they said, "You need to do something." I said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Well, you know, we have to, obviously we had to have a conversation, but a lot of people were talking about it behind the scenes, but no one was taking a stand." And clearly in Denver, there are several people that have written articles and been on talk shows and all sorts of stuff. So you really have some great momentum going here. So our first one was called the Polarized Public Realm, and I showed images like this. Basically, these two houses are across the street from each other. This is a simple working class neighborhood with nice houses with front porches, and this is what's coming in, the pressure of development. And clearly there was very little thought in terms of the relationship of these buildings to the community that they inserted. It was all about, you know, open floor plans and rooftop terraces that you can see the skyline. But the idea of maybe getting to know your neighbor just wasn't on the agenda. It was way down the priority list. And the elderly lady that lives here, you know, I saw her standing behind her glass screen door looking out. This is her view now. This is what she looks at. And she's wondering, like, what happened? You know, what happened to my place? And I think that we just need to think about maybe the public realm as being, maybe move it up in terms of importance. And how do we do that? And there's some simple things, and you've probably heard these before, but there's this kind of hierarchy, these kind of simple houses, which, you know, they're just little simple rectangular houses, 1.5 stories, but they have certain things that work well. They have a I call it this transition between the public and the private spaces that allows you to actually engage with your neighbors. You have the public space of the street and sidewalk. You have the semi-public space of the front yard, the front setback. You have the semi-private space of the porch, you know. And then you have the public rooms on the front of the house, typically the living rooms, the dining rooms. And then on the back of the house, you have the private rooms, the bedrooms, you know, the private spaces, the bathrooms, and so forth. And this type of kind of gradual transition has worked incredibly well for, like, you know, decades and decades and decades. And it's something that, you know, allows people to get to know their neighbor. You can walk by, you can wave hello, how are you? If you're on the porch, it's kind of, you know, it's a simple way, you know, start a conversation. But how do you do that here? You can't. That's the problem. You know, you come home, you go into your garage, you fall out of your car, you go up the steps, and basically that's it. There's no way to do that. And you know, that's a fundamental thing to think about. And I know that there's certain things you can do from a zoning ordinance point of view, but also the culture of design and development. And you start thinking about this. There are also kind of, the other thing I'm going to talk about is basically kind of maybe neutralizing the whole style issue, or trying to maybe talk about that a little bit. And one of the things is there was this idea of actually replicating traditional houses, but basically trying to actually build them in cheaper ways or in simpler ways, or new methods of construction like slab on grade. And also the idea of drawing elevations. When you draw them two-dimensionally and you draw a porch out here with a nice gable, oh great, I have a place to set aside, but it's only 3 feet, it's 3 feet deep. Your rocking chair, bang, bang, bang. I mean, you can't even sit in a rocking chair on these. And so I think you really have to think about things three-dimensionally and spatially. These semi-public, semi-private spaces as being outdoor rooms. And the idea that this is a perfectly wonderful porch where this is, not very usable. And the other thing is, if you're walking by and you're not elevated, the people sitting on the porch you're looking down on them. And that's a big problem, because psychologically people don't feel uncomfortable when people are looking down on you. You need to be eye level to eye level. So the idea of doing houses that are slightly raised is really, really important. And that was the idea of the pop-up porches, is elevating, maybe the homeless are sitting on park benches, and when you walk by, you're looking down on them, right? The idea is elevating them up and basically leveling, the interaction. And I think that's, psychologically, it sounds a little, silly, but those very subtle little things make a huge difference in terms of things being livable. So just think about those details. This is better than this, but, still. And so I saw this afternoon. Why would anybody live here? Right? I mean, I just don't get it. Maybe it's because of the newspaper article. There's such a scarcity, people will buy anything. And that's really works against you, right? They'll just pay anything for anything. You've really got to work on that. Because if this is your public realm, and then basically this is your front door, and this is your backyard, I mean, what is going on, guys? I just don't get it, okay? And maybe I'm just from little old Charlotte and don't get it. But I have lived in big places I've lived on, hung out in Miami. There are a lot of really wonderful apartments and condos out on Miami Beach that are really close together, but they give you really wonderful human scale spaces. So I think this is probably, and I know Christine and other folks have really talked about this a lot already, this is probably one of your biggest, thorns. So you have to work on that. What are we doing in Charlotte wrong? Well, we don't require you to put the garages behind the houses or sideload them at all or from the alley. We let you put them just anywhere. So what we're doing, these are brand new townhouses. And they look great. They take pictures of them during the day when everybody's at work. And then when you come home at night, this is what you do. And you imagine take your dog for a walk and you're just the dog has a lot to kind of, do his business on. But it's just not, this is just ridiculous. And so one of the things that your form-based code does now, I've noticed, driving around, may not like a lot of what's being built, but basically, they're relegating the car to, kind of, around the sides or in the back a lot more. And so you have a lot of active spaces. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Here's another, this is what the neighborhood I lived in used to look like, these really nice houses. This is what it looks like now. And this is this is your public realm. So, you ain't got it so bad here, right? You may think you do, but there's certain things that you're doing maybe not as well as Charlotte is. And so that's where we kind of get into this conversation. And so one of the things I've done we started off with just one forum. I thought we'd do it once and maybe, it would go away. But now we're up to our 4th or 5th forum now. And I've been, the media picked up on it, talk shows and magazines, newspapers, really talking about it. So we try to kind of prioritize kind of our top 10 list, starting at the top and working our way down. You can kind of scan these. I'm not going to read them. But we kind of prioritize them, and basically we came to the conclusion there's a indifference to the public realm. as being one of the top ones. And, there are other things like Style Wars, but it's up here. There's a lot of environmental interest. And one of the things that one of the other architects, kind of what I call is a society architect in Charlotte that, knows, all the kind of big players, he came on the radio and said, I just think that, I think the developers and architects are lazy. I was like, whoa, lazy? You're saying that on the air? And he said, yeah. He said, he has 3 different firms. He said, it's just like trying to get people to do stuff. It's so easy to, on your CAD programs, to drag and drop, copy, repeat, drag and drop, copy, repeat. We just dumb it down, and the developer's like, just do that. I don't want to pay you to, design 2 or 3 different building types. So I think we've got to raise the bar a little bit on that because, that kind of fine-grained quality is really essential. That's one of the fundamental things. So getting back to what I call Civic by design, cities as a work of art. This is one of the many books. This is just a nice image. Reminds me of standing at the Oxford Hotel and looking at Union Station. Great city, great quality of life. How do we do that? What happened? We built the Pantheon 2,000 years ago. How long ago, Christine? Maybe not that long. And this is how we translated it. This is for the people. This is for this, it's all about me, And I think we just really have just gone, off the deep end, and we just need to come back. Because this is what we want. We want city life. We want great places to hang out. Every time I turn around here, I see a brand new coffee shop that's doing a lot of things right. So obviously there are great places like this. But again, this is kind of the urban version of the front porch, the public, semi-public, semi-private. And then, the private spaces up above and behind. And that kind of gradual transition is really essential to making a city that works. And one of the things, like this was a new development that happened in Charlotte that basically didn't work. Basically, people didn't like it, and all the retail wouldn't thrive, and the units above didn't sell. And so one of the things that our Civic by Design Forum does, we do these kind of like little vignettes. We'll actually suggest how they can transform, take the existing building and transform. This thing keeps blinking on me, I'm sorry. Transform by just designing the outdoor room in a way that works and doing things like on-street parking and canopies that these are kind of decorative canopies, like stunted awnings, where these actually come out and create a nice shadow box. You don't need tinted glass. You can actually see the merchandise because the canopy actually provides the shade. They're just very simple things you can do to transform it. And they've implemented about half of this, and things work. Things are working now. We did it. And then there's this whole issue of scale and the perception of, this idea of what, is old-fashioned and what's, new today. And this is kind of a new, I wouldn't call it a McMansion, but you can imagine, this, drawing this two-dimensionally as a front porch. Oh, look, a nice front porch. It has nice, columns and has a nice canopy above it. It's going to be a great place to hang out, right? And then, then they build it, and this is what you get. And so look at this perfectly wonderful porch on this modest little, this is a little, we call them mill villages, a little modest working class neighborhood that's been around. And so we're the new stuff, this probably has much more, a higher level energy rating and all that kind of good stuff. But in terms of quality of life, we missed the boat here. And there's a lot of this, obviously, everywhere we go, how we actually, the dispositions of how cars work. We used to actually, build carriage houses, and the cars would come, off the side street or from the alley. And there's plenty of that here. It's just a matter of reminding people. So, so this is what is considered hip, and this is considered passé. What do you think? I think it's the opposite. I think this is like really passé. And I think this is really great. And we just need to think about how to do more of that. And the other thing that's interesting is that it's not just for affordable housing or starter housing. This is our neighborhood, our version of the country club area here is called Myers Park. And Myers Park is a city beautiful neighborhood designed by John Nolan. who's a famous early 20th century planner, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful trees, beautiful mansions, and we have an allergy against historic districts in Charlotte. It's just cultural. We only have five, I think, 5 or 7, I think. I think you have like 60 here or something. And they said, no, we'll take care of things. So I got this phone call from someone that said, oh no, there's a snout house going up on Queens Road. Do something. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, look, there's a snout house. And what basically a snout house is, a house with a big garage out front, that's predominantly a car, and usually the garage door is out front. And it turned out it was a perfectly wonderful family that transferred from, I think, San Francisco. They were down in Austin, and they found this wonderful house, new house. They loved it, fell in love with it, and they bought it, and they brought the plans up here and started building it. And like all the right intentions, it's a really nicely built home. But it's completely against the character of what's there. And I said, but it's a tastefully done snout house. Because they put the garage, on the side. But then so if they did that, why did they actually design this to look like a garage door? And I was like, some architectural professor in second year told the architect, form must follow function. If it's going to be a garage, express it as a garage. Or something like that. You can just imagine. So we just kind of get over that and think about the public realm. And the other thing they did is they cut down all the trees and they planted back xeriscaping from, which is very environmental, but, culturally, you've got to figure out actually to do it better. I mean, they've got, it's just completely, different. Okay, so part of this, I want to interact a little bit. So we're going to have what I call a visual preference survey. And it's hard for me to see. I don't know if I can turn down these lights or not. But the idea, I'd like to kind of get your raise your hand, okay? And I'm going to ask you. These are 2 houses that are same size on the same size house, same size lot. This is what I would call a neo-traditional house, and this is a hip modern house, okay? And you can see there's certain things about it, and this is talking about style issues. So. Here's the premise. How many people prefer to live in this house? Raise your hand. I saw some timid finger go up. Okay. All right. All right. How many people would prefer to live here? Okay. That's pretty consistent. But I tell you, there's a lot of really contemporary hip stuff going on here. Some of it's really good. So some people really just like that, and they just dislike this. But there are certain things about it that you just kind of notice fundamentally. Basically, the garage is behind. There's more green space here versus concrete here in the front yard. And there's a nicer porch here. This somewhere in that dark shadow is the front door. Okay? And somewhere in this pillbox is a porch. So it's sending this kind of weird message to the public realm. Not necessarily about style. It's just, it's just disposition and building form and house form. Oh, here's another. Oh, look. Here's a neo-traditional house, and here's a, kind of a hipper modern house. Again, how many people would prefer to live in this house? One here? Couple? Yeah? Some people just like the idea of a traditional house. How many people prefer to live here? Okay, great. See? Neutralize the style issue. A lot of it has to do with basically disposition of the relationship. Look how nice this porch is here. Isn't that nice? Look, it's way back there. Okay, so they probably, open the garage door and put out their aluminum chairs. They don't sit here. Really, because they really want to get to know if they really want to get to know their neighbor. Okay, here's another. This is getting a little tricky. Here's a neo-traditional house. Here's a modern house. Same size house, same size lot. Again, how many people prefer this one? A few more, right? And then how many prefer this one? Yeah. So, and this is, it's less, less high modern. And this one's kind of interesting because it's you're giving kind of a 50-50 chance here, right? There's enough green and stuff like that, so you're creeping on. So that's kind of this kind of gray area that goes on. But it gets you thinking when you start making decisions, what is important. Here we go. 2 modern houses. Preferences? Anyone want to live here? Right? Anyone want to live here? Obviously, yeah, of course. This is what we're building in Charlotte. We're not building that. This is what we're building in Charlotte. It's, and it's kind of interesting because I think the architects and developers, these kind of the hipsters, are really pulling the wool over everybody's eyes because they really are selling this as being the coolest thing in the world. And it's not. Look at the difference. So again, let's try harder, right? Let's try harder. Let's think about how do you make a great porch and make it hip and modern? How many can you think of? So we need to work harder. I don't know if anyone's been to a project I was actually a designer for, a project manager for in Longmont, Colorado called Prospect. And Prospect is a modern, it was eclectic neighborhood. It's been around for a long time. These two bottom images are of houses, and basically all the hip young Boulder educated architects came over and started designing really modern stuff. But they also designed them in a way that created a really nice public realm, nice porches, nice stoops like brownstones. And this is what we're building in Charlotte. This is what we get. And I say, and this became kind of a New Urbanism Meets Dwell magazine article probably a decade ago that really said, this is going to save New Urbanism because we've found architecture that works. And I think that we just need to do more of that. So if you haven't been over there, it's a fun place to go. And then there's kind of high style architecture, which, doesn't do a good job of the public realm. And this is actually in Cambridge. And, I call it the Frank Lloyd Wrong House. Okay. Again, look at, these, you recognize these very hip materials, beautiful stone, nice proportion, I love it. Falling water meets, Snout House. So. And, so I think the architects just, you just have to have a conscience about, can't pull it off. Don't try to pull it off. We know better. So that's one, so I'm having a little fun here. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. There's also this kind of idea of scale, and there's kind of this coarseness versus fine grain. I say it with a southern accent, fine grain, okay, but it's, coarseness versus, fine grain. And this was posted recently by an architect. I think his name is Evans. He did a little SketchUp drawing showing, look, this is like a nice dwelling. All right, but let's drag and drop and copy repeat. We're done. Right? But look, if you just start thinking a little bit more about the scale, start playing with the parts and pieces. And maybe there's like a range of density. It's not all exactly 16 units to the acre. There's some that's 24. There's some that's 12. There's some carriage houses, some little stuff going on there. There's much more market range here with this than basically, the price point, the single price point range here. So this gets into kind of the subtleness, the detail. And you can write zoning that does this. Very simple, if you want to. Just a matter of, like, if you're really tired of everything just being the same, for an entire block or more, then maybe this is something you can think about. That's what I was thinking about. This is the South. This is called Southside. It's in Greensboro, North Carolina. And this is on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, next to the freight yards, but right next to downtown. And we actually took a couple of blocks and tried to do that. Started mixing it all together. And it was basically a highway off-ramp that we turned into a square. And then we developed this. It was only 10 acres. 10 acres that transformed the city. This is a small city. Greensboro is 60,000 people. But think about it, every neighborhood has a model. And I'm not saying this is the kind of architecture you want to do, even though I like this. Kind of reminds me of the Denver red brick. Maybe it's a little bit more brown. But the idea is that whether it's traditional or contemporary, introducing things like simple live-work units and so forth could be a great thing. All right, some more visual preference time. More fun. Now, New Urbanism, like suburbia, is now completely passé, and so new, walkable neighborhoods, pedestrian scale features are now really what you're doing with the new development and growth. And so, so let's just take a look at this. This same size house here, square footage, same size lot as this house here. How many people prefer to live in this neighborhood? Like nobody, right? How many people live here? All right, raise your hand. All right. This is interesting. Now, it's interesting. There is this kind of transition, the public, semi-public, semi-private. Look at the dimensions here. This is kind of a pretty wide street, kind of small trees. But for overall, it's like a good standard issue. This is from Salt Lake City. I'm not sure. Maybe what's the name of the big one here in Denver? The one out, they rebuilt the Stapleton. Yeah, Stapleton kind of reminds me of the streets are a little wide up. So we see, so then we get into kind of the subtleness and like where do you go from here? Okay, here's Salt Lake City. This is a village in the Low Country of South Carolina near Beaufort called Habersham, and this was a first generation green infrastructure project I worked on, which ultimately became we call light imprint in terms of laying lightly on the land. And the idea is we were going to create this really distinct little low country village and cranky streets. And if there was a tree in the way, we went around it versus bulldozing it. And natural drainage, like less heavy duty stuff. So let's have a survey. How many people prefer to live here? Here? Anyone? Maybe a little bit? Yeah. I mean, it's okay. I wouldn't mind living here. How many people prefer to live here, though? More. And how many people are undecided? Yeah, a few, right? So you're starting to think about the idea. And so this is not really maybe, I don't know if there are places, historic places like this anywhere here. So maybe there's not a precedent. There are some, maybe. Okay. Well, okay, this has rear lanes. It has rear lanes that you park your car in garages behind. And so basically you have, the car, you have easy access. And basically this is the same size house on the same size lot. It's just that the infrastructure and the kind of the green characters is different. Of course, this is east. How do you guess? Well, you can just roll right off, you can park right on the grass here. How's the what? Well, it's interesting. When you have a grid, in both these, when you have a grid, you have a front yard, you have a front street, and then you have a rear lane, and they're not dead ends, either of them. So basically, each fire truck has 4 access points to every house, as opposed to in suburbia, where it's dendritic, which means a tree system. It's a big trunk with things going off. If car blocks one street, you can't get to the house. So you need wide streets in suburbia so the fire trucks can kind of roll around. There you go. It's illegal. So maybe that's food for thought. It's 24 feet. No. I mean, the pavement's like, it depends. I mean, and that's where you get in. Like, I spent a lot of time in my professional career negotiating with fire chiefs. And I do. And it's like, well, what are you going to let us do? I need 20 feet for my spreaders on my hook and ladder. And, it was interesting. We built wide alleys in one neighborhood, and they called up and said, we can't get through. Everybody's parking their cars there. I said, how wide did you make the alleys? It's 16 feet of pavement. Well, everybody wants to park on park back there. If you only make them 12 feet, then basically everybody knows to behave and get out of the way. So you always have a way to get through. It's just this human nature that, too big isn't just right. There's a certain scale to things that, just kind of really work. That kind of stuff. No, well, it's interesting because there are a lot of big trees there. What we did is this neighborhood developed underneath a canopy of forest. And we actually designed it so that we couldn't lay out every single lot, but we assumed that one out of every 3 lot was going to be a tree save. And that was the pro forma. We just assumed that, and we made the numbers work where we had 2/3 of lots, and we knew we could make it work. And it was a lot of fun to do it. We kept a lot of the trees. I'll show you a couple more images. I'm going to keep going further, just a little bit further. So we're going to go from kind of this green now to deep green. Deep green, right? So let's look at this. Same size house, same size lot. You have rear lanes. You can park your car, get in your house really easy, right in the kitchen. But this is your front yard, and this is natural drainage. This is actually in Oklahoma. This is prairie, so it's all indigenous planting. It's a boardwalk that takes you down to the waterfront. So you live on the boardwalk. Cool, huh? Yeah. But, maybe it's not for everybody. So let's see, show of hands. How many people prefer to live here? Okay. How many people prefer to live here? So it's like about 2/3 to 1/3. It's a little too deep green for you, right? Out here in Denver. And that's okay. And that's what the different shades of green. It's to calibrate for environmental issues. I understand. I asked some people, well, what do you do? Where are all the environmentalists? Oh, they're around. We're just not that, they're here, but, we're concerned about things like energy. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. Natural drainage and water is what this is about. And it's interesting that, this feels just about right for a lot of people. What's also interesting is this is, we actually designed this neighborhood. We didn't say, well, we're going to do this or that. We said, yes, we'll do it every other street. We'll do one here and then another one there. And what was fun is people love to live here and then go over to their next door neighbors on this street and hang out because these guys, the deep green guys, throw the best parties, right? They're just kind of more hippie-like, I guess. I don't know. So there's just it's fun to create a lot of personality in a neighborhood and not just pick one street type and one lot size and bang, 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 bang like that. Create a lot of personality. Most of our neighborhoods have 16 different street types versus 3. The arterial, the collector, and the local. So it's a big difference. So again, a little bit about Civic art. I'm a big passionate person. This is my favorite building in the world. This is my son this past summer standing sometime after midnight on the portico looking out into the Piazza della Rotonda in Rome. I don't think he was having gelato. He was having a great time with a bunch of his friends and just loved these kinds of spaces, the buildings. And so where I'm from, Charlotte, our version of Civic art is our tree canopy. Which you have. I discovered when I was going down 17th, I think it was 17th Day. Beautiful boulevards with big trees. You have cottonwoods, right? And some other trees. We have willow oaks and not live oaks, willow oaks and pin oaks, mostly, but poplars and some others. And we created these kind of cathedral naves that you go through. It's really spectacular. This is Myers Park. It was designed by early 20th century planner, landscape architect John Nolan. And this is our Civic art. And all our neighborhoods have this kinds of streets. This is a very modest little neighborhood called Cherry. Pressured for development, to redevelopment, came along. What did the developer do? Said, I've got to have this many lots here. Trees got to go. Systematically, tree canopy, cut down probably 75 trees in a 3 or 4 block area. And just devastating that we weren't able to do anything about it. Just like this is kind of like a spotty street, but this is what was built back, same street. Really nice houses. I like these houses a lot. The porches are okay, but look what they've replaced. Look at this tree. I said, this is something this is something you scrub a toilet with, right? I mean, this has nothing to do with a tree canopy. Look at this. And so there are trade-offs, like what's more important? And I think that here, I was really pleased that you have, in certain parts of the city, you have an incredible tree canopy. Highest property values, I imagine, in many of them. They're very valuable. So how do you deal with that? And, you don't have to say, well, you got to make it pencil. We got to we got to just clean slate it. And, in Haversham, because we had so many trees, again, you were doing trees, basically, we figured out how to actually fit the houses. We designed them. A little bit skinnier, a little bit more vertical, but gosh, you get 2 porches. We call them double galleries. That's right, Tom? Double galleries. He's from South Carolina. And nice porches. So, it's just, you think about it. You make things fit. You just don't, scrape it. And, of course, this is, spectacular, but the idea that the trees, this is the tree canopy in Haversham. These are live oak trees. They're really, incredible. But the idea is that you can really, fit with nature if you really work at it. You just can't be lazy, right? Okay, so that's kind of more the kind of residential stuff. The next part of this is a little bit about more of the urban stuff. And one of the things that we talk about, like the idea of the porch, and the formula, and the science to creating a great space for interaction. There's also the idea of, in the public realm, of what we see. And in the public realm, humans see, about like this. When you're walking down the street, it's about like this. You don't look way up, and you're not looking down. You're kind of looking at what's going on in front of you. And so that's really the most important part of our public realm, basically the ground plane. That story and or so, and and a little bit of the sidewalk here. And so this is one of our old historic fire stations. This is like a little one-story shop. And then they built this thing next to it. This is what it looks like. And if you just look at the public realm, what public realm, right? And I look at it, and this is a building that learned. Now it's like this really cool business. It says RE, it's refresh, rejuvenate, recreate. Like that was the last thing they did here. And then and then there's like an eye business here. And I was like, the architects and developers should have gone in and gotten some glass fitted, and they should go out and look at what they've created here, right? Go out and walk up and down and just tell us what you think. And it's not good. We're doing it the wrong way. Even the Department of Transportation knows that. Okay. I call it cars behind bars. Instead of this. Just as a reminder. Nothing spectacular about this. It's just a reminder. And, great funky old buildings, but this is what we're doing for retail today. I've seen some of this around here. This is like when the developer is forced to do retail. Well, I'll show you. Come on. It's Tom out with me today over in Rhino. Great. Really simple old buildings. Look how tall these tall floors. They put the awning in the right place. They need to crank this out so it comes over the sidewalk. But what's really wonderful is you create this shadow box so you see all the merchandise, but then you have all this clear story above to let the light in, right? So it illuminates your merchandise from above, but creates a shadow box for you to experience the merchandise below. That's fundamental retail merchandising, but it's amazing how many designers don't even understand that. And how many business people, they just don't understand it. You just have to explain these things to them. And then, new development, cars behind bars. There's something up there, but this is what you walk along. So you have it's a mishmash. There's this mishmash going on everywhere here. It's kind of chaotic. And the architectural profession's trying really hard. They realize they have an identity crisis. They've kind of let down the public, and the public's quit hiring them. They're just going straight to developers and CAD operators and contractors. And so they've started a campaign. It's called I Look Up. #ILookUp. And Robert Ivey, who's a great man, he's head of the AIA. He's doing everything he can. I admire him greatly. Not being critical, the architects are just trying. Because, we're not doing great on the public realm. Let's look up and see our beautiful skyline, right? But this is when you look up in Charlotte, this is what you see. Because our ordinance requires you to cram every bit of parking that's required for your development on your property. See, there's no like parking plan. There's no like in Charleston, Mayor Riley said we're going to build 7 parking garages. We're going to line them. We're going to strategically place around the city so everybody can actually build real architecture. Like, how lame is this? The architect, when you're forced to do this, how do you get up in the morning? I've got to go in. There's 9 stories of cars behind bars. Oh. It's just horrible, right? So there are rules that really create bad stuff. Look at this, cars behind bars. You can do all the louvers you want. You can, this is actually, this is right next to our basketball arena. This is where all the rock stars and all the sports heroes stay. It looks like a jail. Come on, please. And, this whole area around our sports stuff is just full of this. You can't even, there's no one living there except way up there somewhere. One of the things that some of the architects, that understand social interaction, say you can still, if someone's standing like this window here and you walk by, they can yell down and say, hey, how's it going? Right? You can. Up to maybe 3 or 4 stories. But if you're 9 stories in the air, What do you have to, drop a flower pot? I mean, what do you do? I mean, you can't to get people's. It's not. You can't have a relationship with your neighbors once you get. And so if everything on the lower levels is cars behind bars, then there's no neighborhood. There's nothing. And then we keep looking up. And this is our newest stuff. We built this. We took a full city block in Charlotte. They're 400 by 400. We built this beautiful park. And then we started developing it around it like this. And I was like, wow. And people were saying in Dallas, like, what's our identity? I'm like, what is that? Is this Charlotte? I mean, I have no idea where this came from. It looks, and here's another one. It's like egg crates. It's like, we're not egg crates. And it just goes on. There's no, and then it's like, okay, well, we'll give up. I give up. We can't look up. Where do we, let's look back down on the ground plane. Oh, here we go, looking down the ground. So you come down to the ground, and you're like premier, right on the park. You put in a suburban 7-Eleven, and you Scotch tape posters for Slurpees on the window. Like, what kind of merchandising? Like, what leasing agent leased, this to that entity, as opposed to, that? Why not? Why aren't we doing that? And one of the things that architects and developers don't understand is the ground plane should be different from all the stories above. You design the base of the building to interact with the street. And it's, even with all the really nice landscaping, I mean, this is not suburbia. This is bringing suburbia into the city. It really needs to be this. It needs to be this porous edge. So just more of that. As opposed to this. This is what we have. This is what we get. And we get this because we don't have a minimum block size of any relevance, so you can build like 6, 7, 8 buildings, huge buildings, without actually, doing any type of street pattern at all. This is the first image I showed you, that land scraper. This is what it looks like. So basically, like, one street will be like a regular street, and then there'll be 2 like parking lots. And this is what you get. And so we're like trying to figure out how to fix this. And so we were trying to do triage. This is kind of like triage. How do we repair this? How do we repair this building that's has cars behind bars, and it's it's way long. And I'm not going to talk about the architecture, but so we just did a sketch and said, what if? I mean, like, how about some ideas? What if we take that corner of the parking garage that always just gathers trash and bums, go to the bathroom in. Why don't we actually allow for a retail shop there because it's not used for parking? And then why don't we actually, like, at least the upper level buildings have a staircase, a stoop that comes down the street? How much more expensive is that? And maybe even like, break the building in half and put a street over here. And like, look at the difference, and actually turn this, just detail it as a street instead of a parking lot. Look at the difference between the public realm and trees, obviously. There's between the public realm and basically, this. And so there's some very simple things you can do. There's some, kind of repair work that you can do that could make a big difference. So that's what we do. We sketch a lot and try to figure things out. So you can do that, you can do these kind of overlays, come up with something. Well, it could have looked like this. And then you can go meet with the team and see if they'll be able to consider it the next time. So again, those are the 10 points. And there are other things, they're great ideas. You're building a light rail. You could build green tracks. I've been really pushing for this in Charlotte, but we actually have all of our light rail has rocks this big, has ballast along it. So you break your ankle if you try to, cross, and the crossings are too far apart. So there's just all these kind of things that keep going on and on. So I can keep going, but I think at this point we ought to take a break, and maybe we can, and if there are a few questions, maybe we can have questions. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Stay here. We'll do a few questions here.
Okay, great.
Well, I just want to applaud you once again, because this has been my argument all along in one of Denver's older neighborhoods where we have seen the characterization change due to some modern architecture. But I'd like to ask you where you think the disconnect is. Is it in the curriculum for the architects? Because my argument had always been, when people ask this question, well, look, Karen, we don't want a faux Queen Anne. And I get that as well. But I'm thinking, if you're designing something that is so out of character of an older neighborhood, or part of your charge is not to create a harmonious balance of what you're presenting, then there is a disconnect. But I'd like to see it, is it just in willful neglect per se, or is there really something going on in the architect students where they are that far away from the basic concepts that you're sharing? Because that's what creates community, that's what gives our sense of place, gives us our lifestyle that we're all claiming that we're seeking, and we're doing everything against that major goal. So I'd like for you to just kind of touch on that.
I think we can't. I think we should not blame the architects. I think it's a systemic issue. It's an operating system that's in place that starts with the lenders, goes to the national developers, goes to the local developers, goes to the realtors, goes to the builders, goes to the designers. By the time, and it goes, and basically the zoning. There are all these things that are actually working. And I think what's happened is what you're seeing now, but you see a lot of the same stuff happening. There's an operating system in place that basically is humming along now. And I think what you're maybe at the point now where you need to say, let's reassess, and we need to tweak it. And I think that's what's going on right now. And the architects like, oh man, like the budget, the developer, he's forcing me to just, drag and drop. I can't do anything but what they tell me. I mean, that's what, that's part of the problem. I think designers, sometimes the architects can take a stand, and that's what we're trying to do in Charlotte. Like, let's collectively, push back to the lenders and developers and say, this is lousy stuff, right? Let's make it better. So I think that's part of it. Everybody's got to, and like before we had our Pole-Outs Pub around, no one would say anything. Everybody was like really scared to say anything. So you really have to get out and speak. Yeah. Any questions?
How you doing? I'm a architecture student, and I have a question. You were talking about how garages are taking away from a lot of the porches, and I was just reading a lot of studies about how we as a society are becoming increasingly more antisocial. And I was wondering, do you think that that is in part due to the architecture of today?
Yes. Absolutely. And I think, again, as a student, I would really passionately pursue what makes a great public realm. What are the design features? You can read, there's some great writers out there and some great examples. You can look at how, in terms of, I'm an architect and a certified planner, but the kind of architecture I do, I say, it's the architecture I think about is the architecture that, the architecture of city making. It's not the architecture that is an expression of something as an object. It's architecture of city making. How can your architecture prioritize the public realm and prioritize that? How you're contributing to the community around you in the best way possible, and let everything else, and then other stuff just isn't that important, So.
Hi there. Whoa. My name is Nate Schull. I'm a graduate recently from the University of Colorado, Denver, from the Urban Planning and Design program. So I've lived here for like 3 years, 3.5 years so far, experienced exactly what you're depicting in these photos, and have equal concern for this. My question, though, is addressing affordableness and income. We didn't talk about that, but designers, obviously it seems that they're attempting to create these, or even that is the development process has spit out these types of developments. Well, how do you encourage thoughtful, creative, urban public design, but at the same time make it affordable or make it equitable?
Well, I think you have to set a bar at a certain level and threshold, and then everyone that's kind of allowing this operating system to occur has to agree that the budget and the allocation and the profit margins, everything are going to work to deliver a certain threshold of quality of life. And affordable housing, and the mixopoly thing talks about how you integrate mixed income. You know, it'll be fun, you know, building types and that type of stuff. And you can design, most of the projects I've worked on were, we worked with HUD, and we did a lot of, they're called Hope 6 projects, which are mixed income communities. And it's something that you can agree on and you can make it work, but you have to agree on a certain threshold first. And I think what we did is we calibrated it too low in some cases, and we need to kind of regroup. There's a lot of profit out there, you know. Anyone else?
Yeah. Hi, good evening. I was just wondering, several of the examples that you showed that really highlighted some of the challenges with addressing the public realm were because of parking. Oftentimes, large multifamily buildings that have, you know, the first few stories dominated by parking. And I like the example you gave at the end of how to overlay, you know, and convert to public realm. But to make that happen, you're basically giving up parking spaces. And in Denver, like downtown, for example, for decades now, we've had no parking requirements in our zoning code. People still build buildings where that is the dominant use for the first, you know, 5 to 10 stories. And we hear in neighborhoods a lot in Denver when we're working on projects that have, again, usually more density, multifamily, that there's not enough parking. And the challenges here from the development community is, well, based on lot depths, it's really challenging to wrap parking. It's something that's affordable. It's very challenging to fit parking underground for, you know, more than a story or two, and then if at all. Just wondering if you have any examples of, because I think this is a fundamental issue of, there seems to be sometimes a disconnect between wanting this really quality public realm and this high quality architecture and a very vibrant walkable place, but also providing tons of parking. And I'm wondering if you have any examples of how to kind of help.
Got it. Well, you've made several very good points with your questions, and there are several things you can do, and I think we're speaking to this. For example, you know, the big cities like, you know, New York, Chicago, they don't have parking. I mean, basically everyone just, you know, walks or bikes or takes transit. You don't build parking, you know, you don't accommodate parking at every single building. And in other places like Charleston, they, you know, basically they have a parking plan where they actually provide places for, you know, parking. And if it's a great place, people don't mind walking a block or two from where they park. If it's great urbanism, but if it's a lousy alley or a lousy, you know, empty space, no one's going to want to do that. But if it's, you know, if it's where you pick up your dry cleaning and dinner on the way home, great. And I think there's a cultural shift that may happen at some point. But I think that the current generation of really dense buildings being built that are accommodating parking are basically going to be so passé and have so much less value in 10 years than actually real architectural buildings for humans, that the parking's dealt with other ways. And I've got case studies. I don't have time tonight, but I'm going to show like examples. Like Charlotte's struggling, Denver's struggling in some ways. Other cities have actually figured it out. Places like Vancouver, and I can show you examples of how they have an A+ urbanism because they actually, you know, set the bar at a certain point. And there's certain rules, like 6 things you could probably do that would make a big difference here. But, you know, sometimes we're going to have to put on our big pants and grow up and just get, you know, and get over it, especially with the driverless cars and Uber and everything now. Like, you know, and the cost, you know, $20,000, $30,000 a parking space. Talking about affordable housing. Why are we spending so much on, you know, cars? You can build a tiny house for that, right?
So first off, let me say welcome to Denver. I don't know if you've been welcomed by an actual native before Denver was Denver and Colorado was Colorado. So I go back 5 generations before Denver and Colorado was. So
6.
there you go.
6.
But here was the question is, so you got a chance to see a lot of Denver. What did you actually think of those RTD stops where the light rails are and the TODs that are being built around them?
I rode the train in from, what was the station? Alameda Station today. So I hung out, I went in the coffee shop, I walked around. You know, it's really interesting. You know, I think there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of ideas being generated, really interesting stuff, public art. And I think, you know, we just got to keep doing it, and, you know, and every time we do it, we'll do it better. I think, you know, some of the things I presented here in terms of issues, you can see those. I mean, like every project, no project's ever perfect. Every project has warts, part of, and it's like there's a mishmash. We have City Beautiful here that's spectacular, but it's mishmashed with everything else too. It's like this is a real working city. I mean, it's like it's life. And so I think we just have to figure out how we can just keep doing everything as good as we can.